Hey everybody, it's Abhishek Prakash, aka Mr. Geopolitics. Tomorrow, President Trump and President Putin will be meeting in Alaska. This is the biggest event of the Russia-Ukraine war since Russia invaded the country more than 3 years ago. This is the highest stakes so far. This meeting came out of nowhere. It was viewed as something that would take months to plan, but in typical Trump fashion, the unpredictable is the norm. And now the two leaders will be meeting to potentially sign some kind of deal that brings the Ukraine war to a pause or to an end. This, at least, is partially the hope that at least the American side is going in with. Now, there are many directions where this meeting could lead to. This meeting could have many outcomes. And that's the focus of this video, which is I want to lay out the key scenarios, the key outcomes that could emerge out of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Now, before I get into them, I want to talk about the stakes and the current reality on the ground. Biggest question right now is, why is Trump doing this? Why is Putin doing this? And it's different reasons for both. For Putin, he wants to be legitimized. Russia is the most sanctioned country on earth. By standing shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful leader in the world, the President of the United States, Putin is doing what many thought would be impossible when the West effectively shunned Russia after February 2022. If Putin can get that photo or a video sitting or standing next to Trump, then within Russia and outside of Russia, his place gets reinforced, Russia's credibility gets reinforced, and Putin can play the optics card that Russia can do and fight anything. For Trump, it's a different set of cards, a different set of calculations. The ongoing Ukraine-Russia war is a stain on Trump's legacy. If Trump is not able to bring this war to an end, it will be one of the events that causes Trump's legacy to be far weaker than if he can bring the war to an end. But there's also another aspect here, which is that Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He hasn't been shy about this. And at every juncture of diplomacy, with the exception being the India-Pakistan war, at least from the Indian side, all countries that Trump has brokered peace for have effectively nominated Trump through their comments for a Nobel Peace Prize. So by meeting with Putin, Trump may be once again pushing that ball forward. Second is that this is a deal with so many different variables, so many overlapping interests. This isn't just about Ukraine-Russia. This is also about the unity or the fragmentation of the West. This is also about US-China. This is also about the future of NATO. This is also about the US footprint and security guarantees. This is also about US-China competition beyond the trade talks. There is so much connected to tomorrow's summit that, once again, trying to predict the outcome, trying to have any clarity as to exactly what's going to happen is gone. In this new era of geopolitics, all clarity is disappearing as unfamiliarity and unpredictability become the status quo. And then there's the big question and gray area for Europe. Europe faces its biggest test since the Second World War, depending on what happens tomorrow. And I'll go in more detail when I get into the scenarios section. But Europe is watching from the sidelines. Europe is in a strange place where it wants to solve the Ukraine war with America, but America wants to solve the Ukraine war without Europe. This is a very strange position for Europe to be in. And if for whatever reason tomorrow's summit is a complete failure, then the onus of solving the Ukraine war may stand on Europe's shoulders. And lastly is that America First is truly being revealed in a new way. the US president is not opting in for global diplomacy or even Western diplomacy to deal with Putin to solve the Ukraine war. In fact, Trump is opting for dual track diplomacy, where the US works with Ukraine in one track and the US works with Russia in another track. America First has largely been a domestic phenomenon with global effect, i.e., the tariffs. Now it's the first sign of how it is being applied to the world stage is being seen. This, alongside the incredibly significant and geostrategically powerful corridor that Trump inked as part of the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace accord. So that's the lay of the land. That's how Russia and America are viewing tomorrow's summit. Clearly, both sides have very different objectives. Both sides have very different geopolitical desires, and they are using tomorrow's summit for self-interest, for national interest, to shore up their own image in the eyes of their population. Now comes the scenarios. That's the big question on the minds of everybody, which is, where will tomorrow's summit lead to? What direction will the world move in after Trump and Putin depart from Alaska? Now, there are several key scenarios I want to discuss. Let's start with what I'm calling the baseline scenario. This is the most likely scenario, which is that the pre-summit Ukraine war and the post-summit Ukraine war look very similar. Putin and Trump meet. Trump proposes all kinds of ideas, including critical metals cooperation, joint mining projects, etc. Putin listens, Putin doesn't budge, both sides depart, and it's clear that no breakthrough has been established. However, communication lines between Washington and Moscow have been reopened to their pre-Ukraine levels, something that hasn't happened since 2022, when both sides have had limited communication and dialogue from the heads of state. Now that they've met, it's a different playing field, a different status quo. This is the baseline scenario. This is the highest probability scenario where nothing happens, where there is no clear breakthrough, where both sides simply acknowledge the desires of the other, the needs of the other, but don't adapt, don't bend, don't meet each other halfway. The second most likely scenario is that because there is no breakthrough, tensions flare, that the US and Russia collide, that the US views Russia's refusal to bend or capitulate to Washington's demands and desires as the biggest sign that Russia does not want peace, that Russia does not want to end this war. And this is as likely as the first baseline scenario. The first baseline scenario it basically is that the US and Russia maintain their current posture, maintain their current behavior, maintain their current decision-making towards each other and towards Ukraine. The second scenario, however, is about collision. It's a scenario where the US doubles down on aid for Ukraine, where the entire NATO alliance begins to form a new strategy to defend Ukraine, where the Russians begin to advance and make maneuvers within Ukraine, especially eastern Ukraine, that they haven't in the past. This is a scenario where other states begin to play a very pivotal role, like Belarus, where there has been fears that a northern front could fully open for Russian troops to enter Ukraine as they did at the beginning of the war. This is all on the table in this second scenario. And connected to this is not just the physical reality on the ground in Ukraine or within Europe itself, but also the economic dimension, where Trump's secondary sanctions, which target China, India, Brazil, Turkey, other nations that are trading with Russia, get lifted to a new level. Lindsey Graham has proposed that the sanctions on nations that buy Russian energy should be 500%. Trump said 100%. Currently, the tariff on India is at 50%. So there's still a lot of space for America to work with. And this could be the main battlefield. The geoeconomics could be the main battlefield between the United States and Russia if Trump believes that diplomacy has no life. And this means that the relationship between the US and Russia will be on very thin ice, thinner than it currently is and thinner than it was during the Biden years. The US will not be able to do anything with Russia outside of the Ukraine war as long as the Ukraine war is flaring. So those are the two key scenarios that everybody has to think about, because those are the two scenarios with the highest probability. Now, for subscribers of Mr. Geopolitics, let's go into the most significant and disruptive scenarios that threaten to push the world into more instability, that are having a high likelihood of emerging based on certain signals. And then let's get into the wild cards and considerations that leaders must be thinking about.